Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here on the next Korra comic review. This is going to be my spoiler review for Legend of Korra Turf Wars Part 2. I already did a separate video covering my kind of more general thoughts on the book. Here I'm going to be a lot more kind of free-flowing with how I talk about it, so I'll go into depth on everything that I need to. So just be aware of that. Full spoilers from the beginning, and I may, of course, repeat myself based on some of the stuff I said in the first video, but I think I have a little bit more to say about it. So, overall, Turf Wars Part 2, like I said in the first video, very, 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 very average book. And it's very unfortunate that I have to say that. For me, it's now pretty much, I think that's probably 5 comics in a row where the scope of the writing, of like what the plot is, what's actually happening in each of these books, just doesn't feel all that important. It feels like it's just a tie-in comic rather than like the continuation of the universe, where other comics have felt so much more important. The Promise, The Search, The Rift, Smoke and Shadow. Their first 4 Avatar comics I thought were all very notable with what they did, had strong character moments while also having good plot. North and South, and now the first 2 parts of Turf Wars, I felt have been a step back in terms of just nothing of note particularly happening. And especially here, where this is meant to be the continuation of Legend of Korra. We're following on from immediately where we left off at the end of the series, and this is what we're doing. We're dealing with triad stuff, with this new villain who we know nothing about, and we're meant to care about him because he's now changed by a spirit, but outside of him just saying, I'm stronger now, like what exactly does that mean? Like you haven't really explained it, because it's kind of like, why does he become stronger, but then like someone like Yao, Wan's friend Yao, the guy who was morphed by a tree spirit, why does it seem like he becomes, it seems like it has a big hindrance on him, where like it just becomes a weakness for him, whereas this guy seems to have a strength. And then why is it this weird dynamic where like if a spirit tries to kill you, if he doesn't actually kill you, then he gives you these extra powers. It's sort of confusing. That needs to be explained a bit more about, like, I suppose, why that happens specifically, why a spirit is able to do that, in that it's a spirit, but when the spirit merges with a human, their physical the physical aspect of them is what's altered. That, I think, does need a bit of an explanation, and that's where that would be really cool world building stuff if we ever got into it. Unfortunately, it's not given a focus here outside of Tokuga saying that, like, the spirit tried to kill me, but I'm stronger now, quicker, my mind works better, it's clearer, and stuff like that. And it's meant to be the idea that this bad thing that happened to him initially is actually this big positive now, in that he's stronger, he can defeat more opponents than he could before, but he's also more intelligent, and that his plans are so much better than they were before. And they roughly imply that he was already, quite a decent fighter and a strategist, and so this is a pretty big thing that he's actually, better now. But I think the problem with him is just that I don't particularly care about him. The problem is that he's a nobody. They try to explain that, like, okay, he's this new guy, he's just recently come into town and is making these changes, but why do we care? Like, we've barely ever focused on the triads. There's a reason they were the sidest of the side plots in Legend of Korra Book 1 and 2, and they really weren't mentioned after that, is that while a cool world building addition to the city, that this new big city has something like this going on in the underbelly, having it step into the forefront and then not really having a lot of development to give to it is a problem. In that they try to do a little bit more here, in that they kind of lean into some of the other triad members and him enforcing his will over the other triad members, bringing them all together to actually make something happen. And they, the plan that they have is interesting enough, but ultimately it's just the triads are mobilizing, and it's still just the triads who are the villains. And it seems like outside of them, what they do, of course, is that Tokuga's like, okay, the police have all of Kuvira's basically military equipment cordoned off over here. We'll steal that, and then we will have this incredible power, and we'll be able to somehow take control of the city and be a much bigger threat. That's a cool enough plan. It's just that the aim is still the aims of just a gang member wanting to gain more control. It doesn't feel like there's any like deeper meaning to it outside of just he's a gang member who wants power and now has a little bit of an opportunity to do something and is going to do that. He goes about it in a somewhat clever way in terms of like being aware that, you know, realistically none of us at all, even me being more powerful, even with all Kuvira's military might, none of us can really handle Korra because she's got the Avatar state and she's so powerful naturally. We need, you know, a way to stop her from fighting, and that is, you know, the kidnapping Asami plan. And that was clever on his part, using the fact that, look, he doesn't have the firepower to take out Korra, so let's take her out using her emotions against her. That's cool enough for what's going on here. It's just that, you know, that's a cool villain trait. Imagine it was with a villain who actually had good motivations, was an interesting character, and they actually explained something about it. I hope they give him a little bit of a backstory in part 3. Don't know if they'll have time to do it, but you know, it's better than he was in part 1, in that we at least I think have a better idea of him. But it's still a case of like, yeah, give him anything, add anything onto his character. There's a slight continuity error, I think, at this point, and it was like a potential continuity error back in Turf Wars Part 1, and that's about Viper. So what they do in this book is that they basically say that Viper is dead. Now, who is Viper? Viper is the Water Tribe guy who Korra defeats in the opening episode. He's with like Ping and the other guy. He's the Water Tribe triad member. He becomes the leader of the Triple Threat triads in like book 2 kind of era, after Lightning Bolt Zolt doesn't get his bending back. And so they basically say that Tokuga becomes the Triple Threat leader by defeating Viper. And they kind of leave it somewhat vague. They sort of imply that Viper might be dead in the first part, but they immediately kind of contradict themselves, because you literally in Turf Wars Part 1 see like Lin, Mako and Bolin, you know, the Metalbender police, capture Viper, or at least a character who looks identical to Viper, confirming that he's in prison. And then this book says Viper is dead. So they've really made a mess of who Viper is, unless there are two very, very similar looking Water Tribe gang members. Because it's not Shady Shin. We see Shady Shin. It's not that they've mixed it up there. It's just they have killed off a character, but they've also shown the character they've killed off also being kidnapped. Now, admittedly, that might be some kind of weird timeline stuff about when exactly he was captured. Maybe he was released, something happened. But they know he's dead. They treat Tokuga like he's willing to kill people, and Mako and Bolin are sort of aware of that as well. So that's a bit of a weird point. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the triad stuff. It's interesting enough, but again, I go back to the fact that I think they made a mistake by eliminating all the other triads. I think they did honestly make a mistake by basically saying no Terra Triad, no Agni Kais, no Red Monsoons. It's just the Triple Threats and then the Creeping Crystal Triad. And you know, they basically say that like it's basically between them, and but for some reason outside of their big move here, the Triple Threats are actually losing ground to like the Creeping Crystals. And you know, Jargala and the Creeping Crystals, they have a scene where they kind of offer Asami protection, which, looking back on it, is kind of like, wait, were you actually trying to do something good here, where like you are actually offering Asami protection because you think she might be targeted by the Triple Threats? Or is it just their weird way of doing some gang threatening, asking for protection money? Because Jargala does seem to note that like she sort of respects Asami as like a powerful woman in the city, and is kind of like, you know, we need more people like you, we'll help you type thing. So it was an odd scene, and I have a feeling they may end up doing something with the Creeping Crystals in part 3, where they maybe have a turn for the character where like they reveal that like the creeping crystals are maybe there's maybe a little bit more honor to them as a triad. They maybe have better ideals than some of the other triads, despite still being, you know, criminals at heart, I suppose. That'd be cool. Jargala, I think, you know, her interesting character design. I'd like to get a little bit more development on what exactly they're doing there. What else will we talk about? I suppose Wong Young Coon. Again, very, very confusing what they're doing here. He, I think, as a character is suffering because they're just barely focusing on him as a character. They introduced him as like, he's the owner of the land around the spirit portal. He is planning to turn it into an amusement park. That seems to just be gone as like a plot point because of what happened to Wong Young Coon. Tokuga's kind of like taking control of his like, you know, business and has his money and power. And they seem to more or less establish that like in this book, Mako and Bolin begin to investigate into Wong Young Coon. They suspect that based off a lead from Korra, he might be involved in this somehow. They eventually find out, after of course Lin warns them not to try and deal with someone so powerful in the city, they find out that he's been missing for a while. So Tokuga, as we sort of suspect, has been kind of, you know, keeping him kind of kidnapped as a kind of threat because, you know, while he's obviously not the nicest character, he is, I suppose, an innocent in this situation in that, like, he doesn't deserve to die for what he's doing in terms of just making some business dealings. And then I suppose the big mistake he made was trying to hire the triple threats in the first place to attack the airbenders. Someone could have been, like, very badly hurt and so on. So there's that, of course. But yeah, I'm not really sure what they're going to do here. A lot of people have pointed out that like there was an opportunity with Wong Young Coon and them establishing that he knows Hiroshi and Asami, of like maybe going into a little bit of a flashback here, explaining a previous encounter Asami has had with Wong Young Coon. But you know, I don't think there's too much to him. They pretty much, I feel like he's not going to be too much of a factor in all of this. I feel he'll be saved and will, in a way, be forced by the end of the book into kind of giving up on his idea of the amusement park. Which I suppose leads into, what are they doing with the spirit portal? Obviously, the core thing that happens is that Raiko orders General Iroh to form a military kind of cordon barricade around the entrance of the spirit portal, the central one. And obviously, not a lot of people like this. Korra doesn't like it. Basically, very few people agree with this decision because they're trying to promote harmony between spirits and humans. Whereas I think Raiko is more like, nope, spirit stuff is going wrong, an attack happened, cordon it off. And the problem, of course, with Raiko has always been that when it comes to spiritual matters, he always makes the wrong decision. He has no idea what he's talking about and always makes the wrong decision, and it doesn't go right. He refuses to kind of follow Korra or anyone who actually is spiritual's lead on this and really kind of delve into the topic. But it also means that because he's making these decisions on his own, the book isn't getting a chance to really explore, I think, the fascinating core topic that's really at play here, which is the human spirit conflict. And the problem that the book is having, and I don't get why they're having such a problem, and it could go all the way back to Mike and Brian. Mike as the writer, not realizing that, hey, the spirits are involved in this. The way you have presented the spirits in the show, especially Korra towards the last couple of books, and in the comics up to now, you have made your audience not like the spirits. And you've made people kind of turn against the idea, as an audience, that characters actually want to respect the spirits. Because the spirits haven't really done anything to show being worthy of that respect. And that's where some of the frustration with some of this dialogue comes in. Of like, you see Jinora especially kind of being like, you know, very angry at anyone who disagrees with the idea of wanting to, you know, create harmony with the spirits. But it's like, what have they done for you? I get you respect the spirits a lot, but you have to understand as well that they haven't been shown to contribute anything to this relationship. Humans, at least some humans, are trying. And there was a couple of year period where at least it seemed like there was some peace between humans and spirits. But it seems like whenever it comes to actually making a move to actually improve the relationship, it always has to be the humans who are the ones who compromise, make the changes, and the spirits are just, oh, we have to respect them. They can do whatever they want, but you know, whenever they make a rule, we have to stick to it. Like, stay out of the spirit world. And then when no one's agreeing to that, they burn down their own spirit world nature, and it makes them so confusing as characters in that it feels like they hate conflict, but at the same time in the past have been shown to involve themselves in conflict, and now seem to be acting very, very childish in that, like, oh, we don't want you to come into our world. Let's burn down our own world so that you get a bad impression when you come in. It's so confusing what they're trying to do with the spirits here, because if they don't develop them sooner rather than later, it's getting to the point now where it's just like, why do we care? Like, the more time goes on, the less and less I'm like, no, this isn't a human spirit conflict. This is just a spirit issue. Humans are actually okay. I get that some people aren't really respectful of spirits, which I understand completely, in that not everyone's going to be spiritual. In the same way that not every spirit is an expert on humans, yet all of them seem to act like they know what all humans are like. So I think it's a similar topic on both sides, of just each side kind of generalizing the other, when I think at a core they could get along, but it feels like the spirits are definitely the ones holding out from making any sort of a change. And maybe it's an aspect of kind of what spirits are at a base level, which is that they always seem to characterize spirits as being incapable of change, in the sense of like personality wise, in that of course we know mechanically, like when you destroy a spirit's form, they just kind of shift into a different form rather than being killed. But just the idea of a spirit being able to change their mind and stuff like that, to being creative, that sort of thing, that's where the spirits seem to lack, which maybe leads into that's why they like the going to the human world, in that their world you classify it, of course, as beautiful to a degree, but also stagnant, in that it's been the same way forever. And it seems to be a case that only humans who are spiritual, who come in, can alter it, and then the physical world, is altered by humans, because fundamentally, like, we're beings of change and progress, and they see that happening. So it's a weird one in that they seem to be stuck with, like, keep nature the same, protect everything, hate humans for being against nature, but also stay near humans because they're actually exciting and interesting, and they're changing, stuff is changing around them. So they need to really lean into that, because right now the exploration is basically like, oh, the airbenders want to do a peaceful protest march on the portal to force Raiko into, taking down the barrier around the spirit portal. And it's just like, that's just a human conflict that's got nothing to do with the spirits, and that the spirits are actually, given where they are right now with the spirit portal, the spirits, this is something that the spirits should actually be okay with, because Raiko is kind of proposing that no one go in, and I suppose is stopping any spirits from coming out. But the spirits are annoyed to the point now where they don't want anyone to come in. So it's kind of what they want. So it's such a confusing situation, in that it's just the lack of involvement of the spirits in everything involved here, despite it being to a degree at the heart of the matter, is so confusing. I don't get why it seems such an odd thing to be like, I want to know about the spirits, and it's just incapable of getting that done. It really does annoy me that they're taking it in this direction, and they just can't see what they need to do with the plot. because yeah, there's that. Obviously, Raiko has made his decision with the portal, and that seems to be about it. Talking about Raiko again, they make some big moves with him with regards to like, okay, his campaign manager is making kind of promises he can't really keep about we'll have houses built by the end of the month. They seem to later on imply that in addition to all the other bad stuff he did of like here he is criticizing Korra, blaming Korra for all of the situations and not taking any blame on himself. They later on basically say that a tactic he is using to bring Zhu Li down as an opponent against him is that Zhu Li is obviously in charge to a degree. She's right up there with regards to the relief effort to help the people who currently don't have homes and are waiting for homes to be built. They're waiting for new food to come in from Ba Sing Se. And Zhu Li, as the leader of this, of course, is kind of taking some of the heat because she can't organize the food getting there quick enough. And she basically says in dialogue that, look, it has to be Raiko who's the one slowing down the food kind of coming through customs, through the system. And he seems to be doing it so that I take some of the heat, establishing that because Raiko is currently in power, but there's an election coming up, he is stopping food, slowing down food getting to people who need it, just to make Zhu Li look bad. Now, I could see it where they do it where the campaign manager is behind it, and that, yes, Raiko is not a particularly nice person, but it's the campaign manager who's the truly, like, just awful person. That's what I kind of want from this plot. It's just a little bit more balance to this, of like, I'm okay if you commit to making Raiko a villain, but it seems like you're on this borderline with Raiko where you want to go full villain with him, but you also realize that like the way we've presented him before, we can't really do that because he's been the president for so long and no one's really, apart from like Korra, taken too much issue with him. So it's weird that he's just so much the bad guy in all of this, and Zhu Li is just being presented as like kind of perfect for the job, and the thing is that like I can see loads of paths for how they make this interesting, but right now it seems very simplistic how they're actually going about doing it, in that it's very much Raiko's the bad guy, Zhu Li's the good person, and they haven't really made you question Zhu Li at all, and you haven't really had any reason to feel strongly about Raiko because he's made no good decision, and Zhu Li hasn't so far made any wrong decisions. And I don't know if they have enough time in part 3 to suddenly turn that around on its head, in that obviously all of the plot points are going to come together here, but I feel like they did enough with Zhu Li in this book where it's not just a case of like she's not ready for this. The way they're talking about her, the way like Varric talks about Zhu Li to kind of, I suppose, make her fully commit to becoming a candidate, it feels like no, this is going to be what happens. This isn't just a sudden thing that she's not ready for. She may have to quickly adapt to the tactics of the presidential race, of the likes of what Varric is doing, but I can't see them, at least right now, going down a road where suddenly here's Zhu Li making all these statements that Korra is going to disagree with this or that. So to me, the key thing here is that, okay, like realistically, Zhu Li is going to be the next president. Like I don't really see Raiko staying in charge. The key, I think, to making this interesting is how you do Raiko in part 3. Do you continue with him just doing all this underhanded tactics to kind of just have all this be a problem, or do you even him out, or what? I'd almost like it where it comes out that the campaign manager is behind a lot of it, and he basically just says that, look, I couldn't see my campaign manager and that's my fault. I like retire from the race, or whatever the correct wording on that is. He steps down as being a candidate for the next presidency, because of all of the bad stuff that his campaign manager has done, maybe he has done, and they sort of redeem him in that way, and that he accepts that now's about the time for a new leader in the city. I feel like that's probably the only way you could do it, and Raiko still comes out good from this. But at the same time, I think if you take Raiko out of being the president, is that just him kind of gone for the most part as a character? Because his character is being the president, and if you shift that role onto someone else, he doesn't feel important enough otherwise to like keep in any sort of a role. So there's confusion in it on that side as well. Uh, I suppose quickly talk about Mako and Bolin. Bolin gets some nice moments in the book. Just with regards to, he was barely in part one. Mako and Bolin were both barely in the first part. They're a bit more prevalent here in that their quest here is obviously trying to find out what's going on with the triad. They investigate Wong Young Coon. Bolin turns out to be a fairly good cop. There's a nice moment where they play good cop, bad cop, and you think naturally just with their personalities, Bolin would be the good cop and Mako would be the bad cop, but it ends up being the other way around because they find Scoochie. They go to Scoochie because they know that he's acting as an informant for the triple threats, just relaying information, nothing too crazy. And Mako, he takes the approach of actually just wanting to talk to him, whereas Bolin actually goes to like chase him down, bending all over the place. And it's a really good Mako moment, but it's also a good Bolin moment in how he, I suppose, learns that, like, yeah, he's not always going to be the good cop, and that he's learning from Mako, and just cool moments where he kind of says he's learning from the best, being on, partnered up with his brother here. But also Mako talking to Scoochie here about just very much understanding the position that Scoochie is in, because Scoochie's currently in the position that Mako and Bolin were in, of just working with the triple threats kind of more on the side, and just realizing that there's more that he can do than this. Like, he has a responsibility to help people, and he gets Scoochie to eventually like admit some key information, and it puts them onto the path of Wong Young Coon and more of what they actually want to do. But outside of that, there's not too many scenes. The police are in it a bit more, but nothing crazy. It sold me a little bit more on Bolin being a cop, but it feels a little a little kind of uninspired, unoriginal. Where just like, I get that kind of Bolin's in this position where like he can sort of do anything. And we don't really know what position to put him in. Let's just make him a cop for now. Is it just going to be that both of the brothers are just now police officers going forward? Or will Bolin at the end of this book transition into doing something different? Because to me, it's been Mako's arc. Like, it really fits Mako to be a police officer. And while if they do keep Bolin on this path, I think what they may do is that obviously Mako seems like he's being fast-tracked to becoming a leader of the police force, probably next in line to replace Lin as the chief. Bolin, I could see them kind of going down a path where he ends up like being in charge of like a special like section of the police that maybe deals more with helping people or something like that, because that's where he's his character and who he is kind of comes more into play. You saw with how invested in like the relief work he was with the Earth Empire in book 4. That sort of stuff will come out. But at the same time, he's one of the most powerful benders in the show because he's a lava bender in addition to being a powerful earth bender. So I get wanting to keep him in a action kind of centric portion of the book. Mako's arm seems to be healing a little bit, in that there is a moment where he kind of like takes the bandage off his arm, and he like blocks a big kind of explosion, fire blast that's set to kill the police team. But then he kind of puts it back on later on in the book. But it's clear that I think it's on the mend and on the way to coming back. So hopefully by like part 3 that's gone and we're past all that. At the very least, it doesn't seem like he's going to be like badly injured going forward forever or anything like that. It seems like it's just for continuity's sake right now that they keep the bandage on him. Asami, and I suppose the core Asami stuff in the book. What they do with Asami primarily is just that they basically set up her kidnapping towards the end of the book. They have the creeping crystals come to in that weird scene that I talked about earlier on, where they sort of threaten her, but they sort of also say, "Do you want protection?" And it makes obviously Korra quite. When Asami tells Korra about this, it brings out this protective side of Korra, and potentially Asami's weakness as a character of just her not wanting Korra's help, while clearly being aware that she was threatened here, but not doing anything about it outside of, I suppose, thinking that she can handle it herself. When of course the triple threats attack her, she ends up getting captured, and that's like about her involvement in the book. She gets a few scenes with Julie earlier on and so on, talking about Raiko. A few more Korra scenes where like she obviously organizes a date with Korra, and Korra realizes that Asami's missing because Asami never turns up for the date, and it just leads to the end of the book where Korra has to stop fighting Tokuga because they're threatening Asami right there. She's been captured. And I don't think they underpowered Asami or anything like that, because it's clear, it looked like there was a crazy fight that went down when she was captured, and she probably took out a bunch of people but was just overmatched. Because, look, Asami's powerful, but she is still just a non-bender fighter, and while she can take down benders, if a full group of triads came after her, I completely get why she would end up getting kind of captured. I suppose it might play into her learning to ask for help a little bit more, especially now that like her parents are gone, both of them. Relying on her friends a bit more is something that is needed. But I still feel that it is a weakness of the book that Asami as a character, as an individual, feels very, very, very underdeveloped, and we need to know her individually better as a character to, I think, get more out of the relationship with Korra, and to get more out of just the character full stop, now that she's a bit more in the spotlight, because she's in a relationship with Korra, and the relationship is getting a lot of focus. So that definitely needs to be improved going forward as well. And other than that, that's most of the book. I think the problem with this book is just that this is a spoiler review, but I don't think there's anything inherently spoilery about this book. I don't think there's anything that I could say to someone who's really sensitive about spoilers in this book that would just ruin the book for you. Maybe if you haven't even read the preview for the book, of just the blurb on the back, and you don't know that Asami gets kidnapped, maybe that's a spoiler for you. But because it says it in the description for part 3 and stuff like that, it's obviously not the biggest spoiler. Other than that, there's nothing particularly crazy that happens. It's like, politics. Julie runs for president. We know that from the descriptions. Some more triad stuff. Tokuga. Maybe Tokuga getting Kuvira's equipment towards the end of the book is a bit of a spoiler, but it's not really. So I think that's just the problem with the book. Is I talked for half an hour about the book here, but most of it's just about how it could be so much better, that there's potential in all of these plots, but they don't do all that much with it. The problem is that I flick through this book, brief look through the pages. Nothing stands out. Nothing is exciting. There's no super standout scene. Even when I criticize North and South as a series for being, I think, the least notable of the Avatar comics, I still cite scenes like Hakoda talking to Katara about his relationship with Melina, and then bringing Aang in and talking about how she now understands what it is to be in love, and then Aang coming in. Great sequence, great moment. I don't think there's anything like that in this book. As I said before, the best scene for me, I think it is probably for me the best scene in the book, is Julie and Varrick talking, because it develops their relationship now that they're a married couple, and you see how supportive Varrick is. You see him, I think, being a little bit more serious while still, keeping his kind of eccentric personality, but just showing that, look, her being an assistant to Varrick for so long, actually means that she actually has so many of the skills that are kind of needed to organize things effectively as a president, and he has so much faith that she can do it, that if she puts her mind to this, like Raiko doesn't stand a chance in the presidential race, and he gives her the confidence when she's a little bit thinking that she can't do it, to race and have the confidence to do it. That was a really, really good scene with those two characters who, you know, aren't the biggest characters in the entire Korra universe, but it worked well to really characterize them. Whereas I feel that there's a lot of other stuff that goes on here that just doesn't have that impact. So to me, that's the problem with this book. Is just, I almost feel like it's just, I think we just have to accept that Turf Wars is not the most exciting story. It's not the most interesting story. It's just a starting point for the comics, and then maybe next time we can jump in and see what's going on with Kuvira in the aftermath of that. Maybe we can finally go to the Fire Nation. Maybe we can finally explore the Order of the White Lotus a little bit more. Maybe we can finally develop the spirit side of things. Those are what's interesting in the universe. And what it does to me is that it means that Turf Wars Part 3, I actually don't feel that I'm putting more pressure on Part 3. For me, this book, Part 2, has lowered my expectations overall of Turf Wars, in that, to me, I now look at Turf Wars as just this very middle of the road series, and I'm just hoping that Part 3 manages to kind of end it with some excitement. I expect nothing basically that I'd previously predicted. It's really brought down my kind of excitement level for the series, as just like, look, I just have to accept it's only an okay series, and that's fine. But what it does do is, I think it puts pressure on the new Avatar comic coming out later this year. That has to deliver. There has to be something big, notable. That can't just be a random story featuring characters that we know. That has to be something that we care about with the characters going through an event or a plot that actually matters, because it's been too long now. But by the time that first comic comes out, it's going to be like 2 full years of comics where nothing particularly amazing has happened in the comics. The Avatar comic has to deliver, and it's in part the fault of North and South. It's in part the fault of Turf Wars for just not really doing all that much, and it's put extra pressure on that book. So that's my spoiler review for Turf Wars Part 2. On the weekend, on Sunday, we will be doing our Turf Wars podcast review. We're going to be going through the book kind of page by page, scene by scene, analyzing it as we usually do with all of the comic releases. So definitely check out that podcast when it is released on Sunday. But yeah, that has been the review, the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.